All right. Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski with Everything MSP here. Hope everybody's having a great day. I'm very excited for today's event, Unlocking Data Resilience, essential backup tips for business continuity, which is critical, very, very critical in all businesses. Accidents do happen, data loss, system failures, cyber attacks. All of these things can have an impact on our clients' businesses. And we are going to talk through that. They can strike without warning, posing serious threats to business continuity. And we're gonna talk about whether or not you're equipped to safeguard your data and navigate through these challenges successfully and seamlessly to your end clients. Very excited to have Alex Robinson here. I'm going to go ahead and bring Alex in. Alex is with Comet Backup, and there's Alex. How you doing today, Alex?
Doing great. Thanks for the introduction, Dan. Really good to be here with Everything MSP. So I thought a good place to start. I'll give you a little bit of introduction. So
Yeah.
just like Comet, I'm born and raised in Christchurch, New Zealand. Hence the accent you're hearing right now. So I get that comment quite often. People pick up the phone and they get a lot of comments about the accent, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So bear with me for the next wee while. So I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. Probably a good place to start. So I'm not actually from the IT industry. My background's actually in the photography and camera business. So came up many
Cool.
years of managed camera stores, worked in account management in the industry as well. So a lot of stuff around tech. Also used to be a photographer as well, and that'll come into play a little bit later on in this conversation. I talk about some of the things that can go, not so well with backups. And today, I work at Comet. I have a nice simple title of sales. That just simply means I'm usually the first person you talk to. If you pick up the phone, book a call, whatever it is with us, send an email. It's often me answering it. So you'll see my name come up if you get in touch with us. And that means I do spend a large part of my day talking to MSPs, talking about backups, having conversations with everyone. So it's nice to actually be able to put all this together into a cohesive sort of presentation and go through with everyone. I'll give you a quick background about it, Comet, if you like. So we're a backup platform specifically really for MSPs. So whether you're backing up endpoint servers, VMs, databases, 365, we cover it all. We do cloud backups, local storage, whatever you need basically. So Comet's built and designed by IT professionals for IT professionals. You can check us out at cometbackup.com.
Very good. Very good. Being in New Zealand, as we were talking about the other day, it's winter starting for you guys there. We're on the flip side, summer is kicking off for us here in the States. So we're happy. You may not be so happy, but yeah.
I'm a little bit jealous that I'd love a bit more summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's kick things off. As we talked about our topic today, so critical when we talk about business continuity. There was a day and time many moons ago where if there were some type of issue, you could muddle your way through it, but those days are long gone. Our clients need to be running 24/7, 365. There is no time for downtime, right? Every business needs to be running, and we need to be able to ensure that when, not if, but when disaster does strike, because no matter what, as much as we sell from a managed service perspective, more of that crystal ball approach to managing IT, where we're looking into it, trying to identify strengths and weaknesses or identify where issues might occur. There isn't a magic wand, right? As much as it would be great to have a magic wand and just, hit that magic wand and everything's working great, it isn't the case. So What I'm going to do is go ahead and bring up your presentation, and we'll kick things off, and we'll go from here. There we go.
All right, great. So today's presentation, Unlocking Data Resilience and its Essential Backup Tips for Business Continuity. So let's go ahead. So there's a nice wee picture of me when my hair was a little bit shorter and it was a little bit warmer wearing a t-shirt. Now, I'm going to keep the agenda pretty straightforward today. So first and foremost, I want to go over, what actually is a backup. I think that's a really important point to actually, make clear with everyone. I'm sure a lot of you know what a backup is, and a lot of this is also just about how do we tell our clients that, not just, we know internally, hey, we know what a backup is, but when we're selling this to people, they need to know as well. Second thing I really want to cover is some misconceptions, and this comes up a lot, and this is a really big one as well. And it's to try and give you some points and ways to maybe overcome some of those misconceptions that might come through from clients. And these are all based on things that I hear as well. And then we're going to go on to some tips for backup success and go through that. So let's jump right into it. So we'll go on and we're going to discuss, why actually talk about backup tips? And that's a really big one. I did this time, talking about backup, it might seem pretty obvious to a guy who sells software, but it's an interesting topic for me to actually research as well. Why, you might ask, look, let's talk about the kinds of conversations I'm having every day with MSPs who are inquiring about backup software. So, usually these are like frequent specific backup questions. It's, many people ask, specific questions. I want to back up a server. How do I handle file and folder backups for laptops? And I think a lot of times, it's great to have those really, narrow conversations, but sometimes we miss some of the wider stuff. So we really discuss, the comprehensive backup strategies. We're focusing on those immediate tactical needs that everyone has, not, the whole picture, making sure we're covered from start to finish. And that's sort of, what I want to cover today. And, also the importance of actually understanding, understanding the full backup, the real world consequences of everything. So, we need to prevent hardware, protect against hardware failure, viruses, malware, human error, and educate our clients about that as well. And also, some of the real world consequences of this. I'm sure if you've ever lost data, I've lost data before. It really sucks when you see it's gone. And I've fallen into these traps in the past of thinking I've got things backed up when they're really not backed up. They were just stored poorly, and it's cost me. And that's why I want to discuss this. So let's talk about what a backup actually is. So we're trying to basically create duplicate copies of data, ensure that it's we've actually got redundant copies as well. It's not just one copy sitting there, and making sure it is actually recoverable. That's another big one as well. So, what is this to our customers? That's the big thing. So I'm sure most of you've sat there, you've heard all the statistics. It costs billions of dollars every year in ransomware attacks and data loss, and how many thousands of hours it costs businesses every time this happens. But still, you get a lot of businesses out there with that hasn't happened yet, won't happen to me mentality. We see that. Everybody sees that. So I want to tell you a story. I used to be in the same boat as this. In a past life, I was a photographer. I used to photograph sports events and school photos. So, if you get those class photos of your kids coming home, that's the kind of thing I used to do. So we produced a lot of very critical data that we couldn't lose, but we had no actual backup plan. It was all stored on things like external hard drives, DVDs, memory cards, all over the place. It's not an ideal situation at all. And,
Right.
if you lost something, there's no way to get it back, basically. So I think really a key aspect of selling backups is to get your customers to understand why this is so important. Get them to understand, hey, if you lose that, it's costing you business. It's affecting your clients as well, potentially. And really just get that message home. So, a big part of this comes down, there's a lot of misconceptions around backups that we see. And, I'm sure you've all heard them as well. But I like to go over some of the big ones today. So, one of the big ones I sort of hear is, I'm using 365. I don't need a backup. And it's like, well, you know, yeah, I hear that quite often. Many organizations do work exclusively in cloud-based environments now, not necessarily backing up endpoints or doing much with endpoints. But just because something's in the cloud doesn't mean it's backed up. You can still delete things. You can still alter things. People can maliciously remove things if you want to. It's not necessarily retained indefinitely as well. Even Microsoft recommends you should back it up. So definitely something to consider there. Another big one is people think backups let me recover instantly. There's no such thing as instant. No matter how fast you've got your backup stored on, you do have to factor in the time it's going to take to recover it. Whether it's recovering files, whether it's restoring a machine. Be aware of the time that's involved. Multiple backups guarantee safety. This is another one. So 2 is better than none. 1's better than none. Pretty standard.
Right.
But it's critical to actually verify your backups are successfully completed and to actually monitor your backups. Keep on top of your reporting around your failed jobs, errors, anything like that with your backups. The last thing you want to find out when you come to recover a client's device is, hey, it actually hasn't been backed up in the last 3 months. And that does happen. I see it all.
Yeah.
And then backing up data and securing data are the same. No, it's a different thing. You can have things that are secure but not necessarily backed up, and you can have things that are backed up and not necessarily secure. So that's that's another big point. Another one I see a lot is people say, I don't need to back everything up, or that data is not important. To me, that kind of sounds like famous last words, because what a client sees as unimportant today, that can be important tomorrow. You don't really know for sure, or you're backing up to certain folders, and then of course someone's going to go and save something in a different folder, and then it's
Right.
it's not backed up, and then it's gone. Another big point: backups are expensive. They don't have to be. If you want cheap backups, you can talk to me. But in all seriousness, with the cost of data loss, for a lot of businesses, probably going to far outweigh the cost of setting up a simple backup process. It's probably worth it to go and do that. Another one, and this is actually the trap I've fallen into. This is the big one. RAID arrays provide sufficient backup. Some clients and some people like me, before I worked in this industry, I thought RAID is a form of backup. No, it's just redundancy for hardware failure. It does not protect you against corruption, deletions, ransomware attacks. You can't roll back to different versions or restore, old deleted files, anything like that. So that was a lesson I learned the hard way. Thankfully, it wasn't with any client files. It was with my once in a lifetime trip all across the US and Canada. So I lost, I think, 5 weeks worth of photos gone into the ether with that one, which is a bit sad, but valuable lesson. And then the other one is people say we don't need offsite backups. Definitely you want offsite backups. Fires, floods, theft, anything can happen. And offsite backups, cloud backups, whatever you can do for offsite, it gives you that added layer of security that your data is not just on-prem with you, it's somewhere else as well. That hopefully it doesn't get affected by whatever affects you at the same time.
A few things, when you take a look at the different scenarios that you mentioned, as far as, hey, we don't need this backed up. I've seen, being in the channel for so long, you see so many scenarios. I remember a particular client saying, hey, if we were to lose this data, it would be no big deal. We'd be fine. We can recreate it. This is quite a few years ago. Break fix client, not managed, and this was coming from a marketing person that's generating an incredible amount of menus. It was a multi-chain restaurant, and she's generating a ton of menus for each of the different restaurants. And that was when I first learned that people
Dan, are you there? I think it looks like we might have lost Dan. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I've just got notice through from Dan. He's having some technical issues. So I'm going to continue the presentation solo for a little bit. So there won't be quite as much back and forth conversation, but we will forge ahead and see how we go. So far, we've covered some of the misconceptions around backup. So that's really good. So I think next point, let's just jump into, firstly, what are some key aspects of a backup? So this is pretty straightforward, but firstly, having a duplicate copy of data, that's really important. So, backup involves creating one or more copies of data, typically stored separately from the original data source. Data integrity. So you're ensuring the backup data is an accurate and actually a reliable copy of the original. Got to make sure that it's actually good. Redundancy. So that's storing multiple copies of data in different locations to safeguard against loss. Next big point is going to be your recovery ability. So the primary purpose of a backup is to enable data recovery in the event of data loss. So you have to be able to make sure you can actually easily and accurately recover your data. Retention. So you need to be making sure you're actually retaining the data, and the backups retain the data for your specified period of time that you want to retain it for, and it can be restored to all those various points of time. Now, the next big one is automation. So I think many backup solutions will allow you to do this, but you really should be using an automated backup process that can schedule regular backups. To set up in place. We have you have a predefined schedule sitting there ready to go. Next thing is to have offsite or remote storage. I already covered this a few times, but the big one to drive home is to actually mitigate the loss of data, fire theft, everything. Make sure that your data is stored offsite in remote locations in the cloud. Where it's completely separate from the clients and their business. Now, we've gone through all of that, and I think we can get on to sort of the main part of the presentation, which is actually the tips for backup success. So we've covered those misconceptions, and now let's try and make some backups, make our backups better. So, I feel like a lot of these points coming up, they could probably be a half-hour-long presentation in themselves, but I'm going to try to go wide with what I cover today rather than deep, just to try and cover a bit of everything. So I think a good starting point with any backups, it'd be hard to really make a list of backup tips without talking about the 3-2-1 rule. I know many of you will be familiar with it. I'll do a quick refresher. I can't hurt to go over these things a few more times. So 3-2-1 rule of backups, it's pretty widely recognized as best practice for ensuring data resilience. The rule's pretty straightforward. So you want to maintain 3 copies of your data store 2 copies on 2 different types of media, and ensure 1 copy stored off-site. So that can be, in the cloud or in a different physical location. Firstly, having 3 copies of data means you retain the original plus 2 additional backup copies. This redundancy gives you that, it's a crucial safety net. So, even if you have one backup fail or some corruption, you still have the other one to fall back on. Secondly, using 2 different types of storage media really helps mitigate the risk of data loss due to hardware failure or media-specific issues, because hard drives fail, hardware fails. We all know that. So you can have local copies, on-site backups. You can have cloud backups, off-site protection. Diversify your storage solutions. It helps safeguard against these failures of a single media type. Lastly, storing 1 copy offsite I think, is absolutely critical for protecting against site-specific disasters. I keep bringing this point up, but fires, floods, theft, we see it all. Earthquakes, if you live in an earthquake zone, I certainly live in a city that's had some pretty substantial earthquakes in the last 15 years. That causes a lot of havoc. If you've had a building fall down and you can't get back into it for 6 months, what do you do? That's really where those offsite storage solutions like cloud or remote physical locations, it gives you that ability to keep that data accessible, even if the location is actually compromised. And it looks like we have Dan rejoined us.
I am back. Talk about business continuity. I had a very weird situation where my computer froze as I was speaking, and I did see that I was continuing to have audio go through, but I am back. So I do apologize for that.
That's okay. It's good to have you back with us, Dan. I managed to get all my technical misadventures out of the way before the call this morning, so hopefully we can get through the rest of this well. So I've started off talking about our tips for backup success. Literally at the start of that conversation, we're going over the 3-2-1 rule, which I'm sure you're pretty familiar with. And then maybe I'll pick up where I was at with that. So, applying the 3-2-1 rule does provide you pretty comprehensive protection with multiple layers of redundancy, significantly reducing your chance of a total loss. It's really important. Assess what you're currently doing and choose some reliable solutions that actually support this 3-2-1 approach. Test your backups, make sure, they're recoverable, test the integrity of the data. And just by sticking to the rule, you can really help, create a robust backup strategy. I think, this is a really important starting point with doing it. It's just do this. You've got 2 copies of a backup, and, that's better than 1. It's better than none.
I just want to jump in here too. And I think, sometimes we need to think about things at a personal level to really comprehend it versus a business level. Now, they should both be the same. They both should be as shocking and, and enough to light a fire under us to be able to ensure we have this kind of rule in place. But think about, the days before digital photos, right? We always had hard copies of photos, and, they were in photo albums, and maybe they were in plastic bins, whatever the case may be. But then we moved to the digital world where all of our photos are digital, and they're stored on a computer. They're stored maybe in the cloud. But just, can you imagine if all of your memories of your children, your children growing up, your parents, whatever the case may be, if they were to just disappear one day? It would be devastating, absolutely devastating. And I know we're not here talking about backing up our personal photos, but again, just that personal component of it, it puts a pit in your stomach to think if all those memories would be gone. Now let's just flip it over to the business side, right? The amount of time it takes to, put a document together, put a proposal together, you're thinking through, all the different elements. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of hours versus memories, but thousands of hours to recreate it. And if you don't have these different layers in place, A business could be completely turned upside down and immediately go out of business because they are so deep into the hole they cannot recover. But I like to use that analogy, the personal component of it, because I think and while it shouldn't, I think it hits home a little more for people to understand. Um, the outcomes and those ramifications.
Yeah, and I think that's a really big one, and I did bring this up too, that talking about the offsite storage, when you were offline, mentioning that natural disasters, and that's something here in New Zealand we have a fair few of those. Big earthquakes, floods, all sorts, and yeah, you can find, we found when we had earthquakes here in Christchurch, you'd have buildings that were inaccessible sometimes for years. So imagine if your only copy of data was sitting in that building. It might have been backed up even in that building, but you can't get to it. That's why you need those offsite backups.
Right. Absolutely.
So I actually think that it pretty well actually covers the next point, which was using those redundant storage locations. So just do it, because it does pay off having that in place. And I think, what you're saying about someone saying I can just recreate something as well is you're not factoring in the cost of those hours to sit there and recreate things versus the cost of just backing it up. It's probably orders of magnitude difference.
Right. Absolutely.
So please use redundant storage locations. Please do it. And then I think, a big point, sort of more on a tip of let's actually start backing some stuff up, is be clear on what, when, and where. Define exactly what you're backing up. So, it's important for both you, and your team and your clients to clearly actually define what's getting backed up. Are you doing bare metal backups? Specific folders, which 365 accounts, what parts are you backing up, which databases, which servers, make sure that it's all actually clearly, what you're doing, you have it all listed out. How often is it being backed up? That's another big thing. Have that really clear with you and your clients, have a plan in place for that. In a good backup software, it should let you actually create policies to do these things. So you're not having to manually keep on top of this. You can have pre-generated, predetermined policies set ready to go for these situations. So when you're rolling up backups to a new client, you know exactly what you're doing. They know exactly what they've purchased or are signing up for. It's all clearly defined out there. You're determining that frequency and retention, and you're really clear on what the storage locations are going to be. So just be clear on what, when, and where.
And I think too, when we talk about that first part of the backup scope and identifying where in really all aspects of it, where the data is, where what the frequency and retention is. This needs to be a joint discussion with your client. Don't make assumptions, based on what you feel the frequency, of their backup should be, and there can be different levels of frequency based on different, type of line of business. There are situations where someone might be working in a particular line of business software where they're pounding things out left and right, and for them to try to recreate it, if you think about even just as simple as QuickBooks as an example, how often are you entering in? How often are the client entering in data? If it were to go a whole half day before another backup takes place, that's a half day of data that needs to be re-entered if there were some type of a loss. But one of the things that I like to do is develop a backup profile and sit down with the client and say, okay, this is this backup profile. This is where you have data, and also those unusual locations. There's always some type of scenario where data is backed up in an unusual location where you need to know about that. And because if you are only going after common locations where something might reside, and something is deeper, maybe in the root, and is overlooked, then the potential of missing data is pretty significant. But again, I always like to develop a profile with the client, sit down with them, go over it, talk about the recovery time objectives, the recovery point objectives, and have them sign off on it where it's a joint decision, a joint discussion, because really at the end of the day, it is their decision and we want them to sign off on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of selling anything is the end user actual education on the product. I've always coming from a background of, especially selling tech products, I want to make sure when someone buys something from me, they actually are using it correctly. They understand how it works as well. It's not just something, that they've set and, forgot. It's running. They know what's going to be covered and when. So now the next kind of slide here, we're going to jump forward to practice makes perfect. Now this is more probably on your end as the MSP rather than necessarily for the client. And this is a really big one. This is something I see quite often. People will buy a backup solution, and hey, we all sell backup solutions on how easy it is to get the backups up and running. But familiarize yourself with that recovery process. Everyone wants to know how easy it is to back up, but really the question you should also be asking is how easy is it to recover? I try to educate clients on this as well, and I really say to people, hey, especially when they're new in the door, please take that time. Make sure you've done the whole recovery process. Recover the whole way through. Don't just I know how to download the files and how long that's going to take. If you need to recover a machine, you need to be comfortable with the process. Can you do it quickly and easily? And do you know how long it takes to restore and download a terabyte disk image and restore that? If it's in a cloud storage provider, a lot of people just haven't necessarily factored that in to the puzzle. They need it now and just haven't considered and tested it. So you really need to do that full end-to-end test. And I'd say, do it regularly, a little bit of practice, and make sure that you're familiar with that process for, if something does go wrong or when something does go wrong, the whole process and you're ready to go.
Absolutely. I actually got a text from someone listening, when I was talking about RTO and RPO, looking for clarification. When you take a look at RTO, recovery time objective, or RPO, recovery point objective, the thing that we're looking at in those two cases is, I guess the best way that I like to explain it is, how much data are you willing to lose, and how long can you afford to be down, right? So, in some businesses, the data entry, I'll just think out loud here. There are some businesses that are still operating in, both a hybrid of, hard copy paperwork and the digital world. So they might have field service technicians that are maybe doing HVAC, and everything is written down on hard copy on, two-part forms. And then at the end of the day, when they come in, they hand it over to someone, and somebody's entering in all that data. Well, if the whole day went by and there was a crash and the backup only had occurred in the morning, chances are they're not going to lose that much, because they're not entering that data until later on the night, into the night. So that comes down to that recovery time and also just that recovery point. So the two of those combined, recovery time and recovery point, I just wanted to just answer that question. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add to that, but
I think that pretty sort of clearly covers that. It's an important consideration for every single client and their particular needs of how frequently are they creating that data. If it's I think you mentioned something like QuickBooks earlier as well. If you're frequently, creating lots of data, you need to have more frequent backup times. So, really just get to know your client's business a little bit, and discuss that need with them, and be really clear on what you can offer, and what it would look like in that scenario as well, in terms of what are you going to get back from a recovery, how complete is the data, how many hours of data would you lose based on how frequently you back up, all those kinds of things. So there's a really clear understanding, because if you outline that and you get a good clear understanding with people, it really removes that that customer dissatisfaction scenario where they're thinking one thing, you're thinking another, and the dissatisfaction has come about simply by them not truly understanding exactly what they're covered for. It's a bit like buying insurance. You buy your home and contents insurance, and then you go to make a claim, and it's like, oh, that's not covered, this is not covered, because no one's ever explained the fine print to you, basically.
Right. Exactly.
So the next point, and this is a big one as well. I probably could say this for every slide that this is a big one, because every point is kind of a big one. Document your process. Make sure you've documented that backup process. It kind of ties into the last two as well. The what, when, and where, and practice makes perfect. But actually take the time to write down the whole process. Clear, detailed record will allow you and your team to follow established procedures, especially if you've got more than one person on board, and more than one person needs to know how to go in and do the backups or do the recovery. It really pays to have this written out, so people will actually follow the instructions and do it correctly, and make sure it's implemented correctly, recovered correctly. No one's running around like a headless chicken trying to figure out how to get people's data back when something goes wrong. It's all written there in a nice handy instruction book. So it should specify what's being backed up, how often, where it's stored, what method's being used, as well, and it helps you identify and fix issues as well. So, and make sure everything. Another big one, make sure it's complied. Your backup's actually complying with any particular legal requirements or compliance requirements that your customers have as well. Having all that written out is really useful. It makes onboarding new staff easier, because you can say, here, this is how we do it, and this is how we do it in my shop. Follow this, please. It goes a long way when you come into a new position and there's clearly established processes in place that you can follow. It supports any auditing and provides straightforward roadmap for data recovery. Pretty simple. You just pick it up and do it. So really just make sure you've got that thorough documentation in place, because quite often, we get support tickets from someone who, they've come into the company, someone else has set the backups in place, that person's left. Now this new person's suddenly has to do a recovery. They have absolutely no idea where to start, because, maybe their only interaction with the product up until that point is, they see the job logs and, in their email and the RMM basically saying, oh, successful job, etc. But they've never actually necessarily gone in and done a recovery for a client in a, high pressure situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, incidents are going to happen no matter how much we plan and prepare, but it's how we respond and react to that incident which makes or breaks the situation. I mean, we can't control that a drive's going to crash. We can't control that there might be fire theft, or any other type of natural disaster. Especially when you think about here in the States, we've had an unbelievable amount of tornadoes ripping through the U.S. And I believe at least 200 to 250 more tornadoes than normal, and we have no control, no idea where or when that's going to happen. But again, our ability to help bring that client back up and get them up and running so they can continue to while they rebuild, if you will, they can continue to bill their clients, they can receive their payments, they can continue to get to work orders, whatever the case may be. It's critical. And so clear documentation makes life so much easier. And despite the bad situation, you can help make it a little bit better by being able to say, we got your back. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to help you restore and get back to where you need to.
Exactly. Now, sort of jumping forward from there, a really key thing with your backups as well is actually monitor your backups. The old saying, the watch pot never boils. Normally you want your pot to boil, but for the sake of this analogy, you actually don't want your pot to boil. Make sure you've got a good process in place to actively monitor the status of your backups. So that, whether that's automated reporting that you've set up, whether you're using an RMM to monitor your backups and check your job logs. It's just really important to keep on top of this. Like I said, I mentioned before, you get situations where no one's monitored a job and it hasn't been backed up for months, and then suddenly that client needs that data back that should have been backed up yesterday, and it's not there. That's a really big thing. So keep an eye on your client storage usage as well. That's another big one, especially if you're using cloud storage and they're paying for that, you're paying for that, however you're structuring it. Monitor how much storage is being used, and basically just really keep a close eye on things. This point actually came through from our support team. This is one of their big ones, is to just please monitor your jobs and stay on top of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is an area that if you do not have in place, where there's some kind of standard operating procedure, whether it's a manual process, it's an automated process. I don't really care which direction you go in. It has to be in place, because you don't want to find out that when disaster strikes, the backup stopped working 21 days ago, and that will make or break that relationship with that client, and that becomes an issue on you, not on them.
Yeah. You don't want to lose a client and have that kind of situation and spoil your reputation over literally just taking minutes out of your day to check logs, basically. Go in and see if there's a job that hasn't run, go and investigate it, and resolve it. So it's a lot better to put a few minutes into it each day or now than it is to deal with the consequence of failed backups or errors or whatever the case has been. Just do it, basically. Just monitor it, put a process in place to do it. It doesn't have to be complicated, but please do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, can't be more clear on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, the next big one, security. Make sure you put your security first, and how security is structured is, of course, going to depend platform to platform and what you're using and how that fits into everything else you're doing. But make sure you've got secure backups, good passwords, MFA, all the standard security stuff that you should be doing for everything. Make sure it's in place for these as well, because you don't want anyone else having access to your data. So just make sure you put your security in place. Make sure your backup server or management console is secure as well from an administration point of view. That people sometimes overlook that one a little bit. They'll secure the end user side of things, but make sure yours is secure as well. And of course, look at things like securing data. You can enable object locking with a lot of S3 storage providers as well. So your data is now immutable. That's a nice little additional protection against various different kinds of ransomware and attacks on your system as well. That no matter how bad things go with the endpoint, basically, your backup is going to be secure. You can go back and recover that to another machine and get up and running again. So don't overlook the security. I know you probably hear that from every presentation about every kind of software and tech product, but security.
Yeah, and and I'll just state here too, for the things that we're talking about, some of these might seem like common sense, and there might be the of course I know how to do that. But
Mm.
I think we all, we got to understand that we are in a very complex industry. What we do is not easy. And I think the reminders are always good. There's nothing wrong with, getting those reminders and double checking.
Yeah.
Because we might have all the faith in the world that, a member of our team has got this down pat and has got, everything taken care of. Last thing you want to do is find out that, maybe you gave a little too much, faith, in a coworker that's responsible for this. And when disaster strikes, you find out that they missed a beat, they skipped a beat, and then it's going to impact you. Because at the end of the day, as an MSP owner or an MSP leader, the buck stops with us. And regardless of where we're delegating to others, it's still at the end of the day, it's going to come down on us, and we're the ones that will have to take the heat for it.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, when it's your name on the door, so to speak, it is on you. And while as Dan mentioned, a lot of these points, they do stray into sometimes you look at something and go, oh, that's pretty obvious, but it's a whole lot of points that, are like that. And it's making sure, you have covered all these points, because this is all stuff, we do see this as the people who provide the software to people doing backups, that, even very experienced people, been in the industry a long time, done all these things, it's so easy to just overlook, 1 out of 10 things. And that, that one little thing that gets overlooked can make all the difference in a situation. So yeah, just, security though, really, really important to put your security first. Next one too, we'll jump on to checking your retention policies. It's a big one, sensible retention policies, and making sure you've actually put them in place. And you can, basically, it's a big one. Make sure you are actually keeping things that you need to keep. Things are being backed up, when they need to be backed up, and retained for what period of time you've agreed to keep them with the customer as well. So going and making sure your retention is set correctly in the system. Once again, we do see people think they've set it correctly, may not have set it correctly. Go through and do this. Also, when you're doing things like retention, consider any particular compliance requirements your clients actually have for how long they're going to retain the data for, and how frequently backups have to be retained for as well. So, I'm sure most of you are pretty familiar with sort of the good starting point, which is the grandfather, father, son retention policy. Things like, daily backups for a week, weekly backups for a month, monthly backups for a year. That's a good starting point that you hear a lot. But, as sort of Dan alluded to earlier, you might have a client that really requires more frequent backups to be kept as well, or less frequent, or whatever the case may be. So, tailor that to suit what the client needs, but really think about how long you're keeping that data for. And also consider, is there particular things that your client actually needs to archive indefinitely? Whether, once again, that's a compliance thing or just critical data for their operations. Make sure you're actually covered there. And a good software tends to allow you to do incremental backups as well. So you're not going to have to necessarily use up a ton of storage constantly doing full re-uploads of all of these as well. So that's a big thing to consider in this process, is your retention policies.
Absolutely.
Cool. Now, the next one here, falls into the slightly obvious category, but once again, I do see a long tail of people who don't do this. When I look at our statistics, update your software. I shouldn't need to elaborate too much further on this, but make sure whatever software is running on the endpoints or servers that you're backing up is updated. If you're using a platform where you're managing your own backup server or infrastructure, make sure that's kept up to date as well. Pretty straightforward from a security point of view, and also even from access to new features and functionality point of view as well. Just run those updates. Doesn't take too long usually. Most systems will give you a way to push bulk updates out to endpoints as well. But please just do it. We see a long tail of people that don't. Now, another one, this is, we'll sort of work this into a fair bit of what we're talking about today, but, really educating your clients about these things is actually just as important as you knowing all of them. Are your clients on the same page and understanding what a backup is actually doing for them? That's a big one. Do they know what's covered, how frequently, where it's stored? They understand what's included, what the limitations of a backup are. All those kinds of things. It really helps have that clarified with them. Talk through some of those misconceptions that we covered in the start and make sure they actually understand, hey, they do probably want to back up their 365 accounts. And make them really understand, explain to them, this is something you guys are dealing with every day. You know how important backups are. You've probably got a million stories you can tell them about things that have gone wrong where clients haven't backed up correctly. Make sure your clients really understand why backups are important, and also understand what a process in a disaster would look like for them in terms of recovery. How quick can they expect to be up and running again? What's it going to look like? What may be needed at their end? What do you need to do at your end? How does that all tie together?
Yeah, and I think just to add in here, when you have your, whether you have a quarterly business review or if we just call it a TBR, a technology business review, regardless of the cadence, address backup because there may be changes in their environment that maybe the frequency of backups needs to be increased. Maybe the volume of business that they're entering in has increased substantially, where the time in between backups may not be enough. And we've got clients that say, if we were to lose a half hour of data times the number of CPAs that we have working for us, it's an incredible amount of money that it would take, an incredible amount of time to be able to re-enter in that data. So having that refresher and just readdressing the frequency of the backups is critical.
Absolutely. It's not just a set it and forget it type of thing. And I think that's that's not a trap people want to fall into. It's just think it's set, it's running. I can see the jobs are good. That's all I need to think about. No, go back and reassess their needs regularly, like you just said, Dan. Right now, really, consider disaster recovery planning. This it ties into everything else, but have that plan. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of you have seen either in movies or, you've seen at a fire station what happens. The fire alarm goes off. Everyone jumps to action. They all know exactly what to do. They're all dressed, geared up, ready to go out that door within, feels like seconds, flying off. Everyone knows exactly where everything is. It's all set up, ready to go when there's a disaster. Have that plan in place for these various different disasters that can happen. Make sure that the backup's integrated into that recovery plan, so you can get their files back while you're getting everything else back up and running as well. So make sure you got those clear procedures in place. Just part of that list of being clear, making sure everyone knows what's going on.
100%.
Yeah. So, and then, a big one is, we all hear cloud service this, cloud service that, everything's in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes you get people get a bit jaded about it even. But, if you're using cloud backups, and for a lot of people, I'd say you probably should have it as part of your offering. Be careful. Choose reputable providers. Understand their retention policies as well. All that kind of thing. Understand the performance limitations as well when you're choosing, especially storage providers. Actually test and understand the recovery time when you're downloading from cloud storage. check what their geographical redundancies like, check where the data is being stored, and that's another big one. If you've got compliance issues, if it can't leave the country, there's plenty of industries and businesses where it has to stay inside the country, regardless of what country you're in. That's more and more common nowadays. So check that they have servers in your country, in your region, that's covered. So yeah, just use them wisely, basically, and really understand exactly what you're buying, what's included, what the limitations might be when you sign up for cloud services of, especially storage services. And then, we're getting pretty close to the end here. I've covered all the sort of main points that I want to go through. There's probably 100 more I could come up with, but we only have an hour today. So, I just want to say, a really big thanks to everyone. I know we've gone through a fair few, and I hope, some of these, that might have been a bit of a refresher for you. It might have been something you hadn't considered, but I hope you all got some value out of it. So I think, to summarize, the most important place to start is setting a plan from the outset of what you're going to do. Take that time, after you put it in place, to test. Check security's configured correctly and everything's set up correctly, and really don't forget to document your process as you go. That'd be my big takeaway from this. Have it written down, know what to do when something may unfortunately go wrong.
Because it will.
It does go wrong. I talk to everyone nowadays. Everyone's lost some data, personal data, business data. It happens to all of us. As I say, it can be as simple as your holiday photos. It can be as complex as your entire business, or we're seeing things like hospitals. This is a big one that happened here recently in New Zealand. A large public hospital had a ransomware attack, and it took them, it was like, I think, months to get things back up and running again. It was completely destabilizing to their operation. You can imagine the hospital pretty much ground to a halt for quite some time. So it has really serious, in that case, it's actually life-threatening real world consequences if backups aren't in place correctly, and people haven't made sure they can actually get things back up and running and recovered when disaster strikes. So that's probably my key takeaway, is just really make sure whatever you're doing, make sure it is really working.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna share a screen here for anybody that's there we go. So if you are looking to learn more about Comet Backup, if you go directly to our website at everythingmsp.com. Of course, you can go to cometbackup.com, learn directly, go directly to their site. You can search for any of our vendors here. So we're going to type in Comet here, and we'll choose Comet Backup. And what's nice here is it brings you right to a page with a lot of information about them. You've got some social media integration. They've got some videos. And if you wanted to send a message to them directly, you could just simply click send message, fill out the information, hit submit, and it will go right to them. There's a start a free trial and schedule a demo button here that will take you to their landing pages. Additionally, I want to show you they have a deal. And so there is a special deal from Comet Backup for everything MSP. You have a $50 free credit for the first 90 days with Comet Backup. And I don't know if there's any more you want to elaborate on that, Alex.
Yeah, so definitely take advantage of our free trial offer if you'd like to see what we can do. Also, if you book in for that demo call or that sales call with us, there's actually a good chance you'll wind up talking to me directly as well. I'm on those calls, I take them. Or if there's a particular thing from the webinar today or anything you just want to talk to me directly about, just feel free to shoot me through an email. It's just alex@cometbackup.com. Easy to remember. I'm the only Alex here, so I get the nice, easy email address, and I'm more than happy to take those calls or emails rather and answer them for you. And if you do jump on a trial with us or using any other platform, test, is what I say to people while they're on those trials. Really test the system end to end, regardless if it's our platform. I'd love it to be, but make sure it really is doing what you think you need it to do before you go live with any clients. Don't just day one jump on the trial, and start backing up clients. Test the whole process on, internally. Make sure you're 100% confident. Ask the questions first, get help first, from us, from our tech team and support. We want to make sure you're good to go before you do anything with clients, and we're here to help.
Awesome. Well, Alex, I want to thank you so much for your time today. A lot of great information, whether it's a refresher for you or it's brand new information. A lot of great tips to follow through on. And again, if you want to learn more about Comment Backup, please check them out. Alex, any parting words from you?
No, just really want to say thanks, Dan, for hosting this, and to everything MSP. It's great to work with you guys, and really a big thanks to everyone who's either attended watching this live today, or if you're watching this after the fact. Hopefully, the information is still just as good and relevant then as it is now. I tried to keep this to points that are relatively timeless, as much as anything in IT and software can be timeless. So I just hope you found some value in some of the points. And as I said, if you want any additional information about any of it, you want to have a chat about it, just send me through an email, alex@commentbackup.com.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. We will speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.